All right, hello everybody. Today is Monday, June the 10th, and Mars has just recently ingressed into Taurus. We still have a stellium of planets in Gemini, and this Gemini stellium, Sun, Venus, Mercury, is in a square to Saturn in Pisces. Jupiter is also in Gemini, but it's not as close with the other planets right now. Um, and basically, what's on my mind today is basically just being thankful for surviving the Mars and Aries transit, because to remind you, we just had eclipses in Aries, which were a little bit gnarly and a little bit dramatic. And there's something about Mars ingressing into Taurus, which is a kind of a marker that this particular phase of Mars and Aries and the Aries eclipse cycle, the whole Aries eclipse thing is less charged now that the ruler of Aries, Mars, has moved on into Taurus. However, there is a certain tension here because right at this ingress into Taurus, we have Mars squaring Pluto in Aquarius, and Pluto usually stands for the repressed or the secret or the hidden, so there's some kind of tension between Mars and Pluto coming out that is still a little bit dramatic, but there's a sense of relief, I think, of at least having this having made it through this bit, right? Now, one of the things that I have to admit with my own channel and my own approach to doing astrology videos is that I'm kind of been a lot of this Aries stuff about being independent and stuff like that. I have been trying to have the courage, basically, to do my own thing with this channel. And oftentimes, I realize sometimes when I watch other people's astrology videos, I am often reminded that I'm maybe veering off the path of what people might expect for astrology videos. And I have to admit that for the last couple of years, it's been an ongoing thing where I always feel like I'm on the verge of quitting this channel, or I keep having to remind myself why this is particularly the thing that I'm choosing to do. There's something about also the whole thing about the, Chiron was in Aries, and there's this thing about like the healing wounds and all this kind of stuff. And I have to admit that I was kind of like using the whole thing about the Mars in Aries I was kind of going my own way with it, because I feel a certain pressure in my life to sort of assert some kind of independence. And however, I noticed this funny thing, which actually this goes with the Mars-Pluto thing, because one of the things I brought up was that Emily Dickenson had Mars conjunct Pluto in Aries, and what we associate with independence or being an individual or doing it your own way or something like that is usually not what we associate with Emily Dickenson. Now, for those of you not familiar with Emily Dickenson, she was a woman who is renowned as one of the great American poets. However, she spent her whole life living a reclusive life with her family. She apparently only published about 10 poems in her entire life, and then a lot of her work was published after she died. And not only did she not go out very much, apparently she, like, into her later period life, the only time when she went out was she would go on these night walks, right? She'd be kind of like this ghostly figure who would like only come out at night and lived in this sort of like totally just like this life of total like reclusiveness, right? And now I'm just what I want to do is admit that maybe it was not the best option for me to focus. I mean, the thing is that it's interesting for me because I don't think a lot of people go this direction with their astrology videos, but there may be some sort of common sense, because I mean, I'm thinking just basically in the kind of situation we're in life now, that there is there's a certain pressure to like survive and like assert independence and all this kind of stuff. And I don't think that maybe Emily Dickinson is the best kind of role model for that, maybe. But I still think there's something to appreciate about Emily Dickinson. And I think there's something. I was going through some Emily Dickinson poetry, and I thought I would read a poem to sort of illustrate the point, from the perspective of a woman who spent her whole life as a recluse, who only came out at night, who didn't do the things that are expected of most normal people, right? And this poem is called "I Felt a Funeral in My Brain" by Emily Dickinson. I felt a funeral in my brain, and mourners to and fro kept treading, till it seemed that sense was breaking through. And when they all were seated, like a service, like a drum, kept beating, till I thought my mind was going numb. And then I heard them lift a box and creak across my soul, with those same boots of lead again. Then space began to toll, as all the heavens were a bell, and being but an ear, and I, and silence, some strange race, wrecked, solitary, here. And then a plank in reason broke, and dropped down, and hit a world at every plunge, and finished knowing then. Now, to remind you that Emily Dickinson had Mars in Aries conjunct Pluto, and what we are going through right now is a Mars in Taurus square Pluto. So the Mars-Pluto dynamic is strong. And this is, I'm kind of retrospectively reflecting on the Mars and Aries transit, which has just completed itself. And there's this thing about Pluto, which I feel like is a kind of like going... There's a certain, like with Jupiter, it stands for this kind of order, a rule of divine providence, but Jupiter's brother was Pluto, and the underworld was kind of like a unreasonable place, a place of the kind of illogical, surreal kind of contrast to Jupiter, right? And there's something about my own life where I had I mentioned it before, a psychosis at one point in time in my life, and this is the thing of, there was a certain course in my life that I was on, that reasonable people, following the course of the pattern set forth by reasonable people, and at some point, like that Emily Dickinson poem, it's like you're walking on a bridge and you step on a plank that breaks and you fall into the abyss of unreason, of unreasonable things, of an unreasonable life, and so I think, and if you're not careful, if you fall into that abyss, you may just end up being a kind of person who lives a reclusive life, who only comes out at night, and who writes poetry, basically, right? And this is one of the things that attracts me to astrology, because I think there's a certain... Astrology also functions on this principle of poiesis, or that there's some sort of creative process at the heart of the world that we live, and I think that this creative process is fundamentally poetic, right? Now, that there's this whole thing about, like, whatever, masculinity and femininity and being able to be a strong, independent man and not being a little girl who goes and hides away from the world to write poetry, right? And one of the things, like, one of my dedicated followers to this channel in the comment section of my last video reminded me that it's all the anniversary of D-Day. You know, a lot of men, brave men, lost their lives on the beaches of Normandy. You know, when the Americans came to fight in France in World War II, right? And among those people who were the brave, you know, not only the people landing on the beach, but the brave submarine naval crew fighting in D-Day, there was another poet. Yes, another poet involved in the D-Day invasion of Normandy. This man was a naval officer on board a submarine, and his name was Lawrence Ferlinghetti. And I have this book from him, Poetry as Insurgent Art, right? So, and I think this helped, because Lawrence Ferlinghetti also had an Aries stellium, he had Mars in Aries. And, you know, maybe it would have been better for me to remember this guy during the Mars and Aries transit. I might be a bit like, well, you know, whatever. Mars has just ingressed into Taurus, right? So it's not so. And Ferlinghetti also had Pluto in Cancer, so there's a bit of a Mars-Pluto square. So it's not totally off base, right? Now, the thing about this is, like, the thing is that I should also say that I've been going through this thing recently. Like I said, I mean, there was a question, going through this ingress period, there's whatever agenda there is, whatever business Mars has in its sign, there's something that comes to a kind of a peak when it makes this ingress, where I'm kind of like, this question of asserting independence or the male drive to individuation and stuff like that is you know, expressed in this there's this line in this book anyways that says, go to sea in ships. From, you know what I'm saying, this guy was in the submarines on an invasion of Normandy. Go to sea in ships or work near water and paddle your own boat, basically, right? And this is the kind of thing, is that I'm a millennial who lives with my mother and my sister, and I have managed to get through this Mars and Aries transit, but there's some pressure still to be able to paddle my own boat, right? And there's something about this whole process of poesis, right, or the poetry of life, right, that is like, well, I don't know. Maybe I'm having this voice kind of coming in that says that I don't need to get into, but you know, maybe I will anyways, right? There's some kind of like, for example, I was going through all this stuff. I've been going through this stuff I feel like I've been stuck in this kind of like log jam where there's this sort of pressure to be more independent from my family. And I have not been finding a way to meet this pressure. And there's certain things that come up in weird ways that like poetically play off of this dynamic, right? And one of those, like last year, I believe it was, I made a video where for some reason, I decided to talk about this Prince song called, like, Lady Cab Driver. And the whole idea was kind of like about gender issues, gender equality, equal opportunity, and all that. And also this whole thing about, like, I'm not a person who drives, and I'm feeling a lot of pressure to learn to drive, to get a driver's license, to be able to paddle my own boat, basically, right? But there's this whole thing that is also a kind of like this kind of unfairness in that, you know, like women typically don't work as cab drivers, right? And I was kind of reflecting on this, and there's a certain like that if men work as cab drivers, it's one of like actually a pretty dangerous profession, because a lot of the time, you know, you don't know who you're picking up, and you might have violent people who try to rob you or whatever. Like there's a reason why, or it's a kind of a rough job. But a lot of the taxi drivers are these kind of like weird people will have post-traumatic stress disorder, or like, you know, sometimes when I catch cabs, and the guy who you catch a cab is like, the guy driving the cab is like a Vietnam vet or something like this, right? And it's kind of like, you know, like there's still this sort of gender inequality where men are more likely put in these positions than women, right? Maybe I'm getting off track here, but I was basically reflecting on that in this Prince song, "Lady Cab Driver," right? Or that there's something effeminate, there's something emasculating about being a man who's not able to drive, or that has not, like, I have a sort of bit of a disability, and I'm not. That's one of the things, is that I'm not sure if my disability is so extreme that I'm just like not able to drive, or that, but like maybe I should just like try to do it and then see how far I get with it. But like it creates the situation where if I'm living with my mother and my sister, and I'm dependent on these female family members to drive around, it feels kind of humiliating and emasculating, right? And it also feels like I don't have much control over my own life. And so after making this video last year, one of the things that happened was that immediately after making it, my mother asked me that she needed help because she wanted to pick up. It was kind of funny because I think I was also reading this book, and I may have even read this thing about how I need to paddle my own boat, right? How being my own like captain of my own ship, right? And this sort of naval metaphor, right? And you know, and I was riffing off the thing about female. And my mom asked me to come along with her because she wanted to pick up a massive sailboat sail, right? And I have no idea what. I mean, I think what she wanted to do was that she wanted to take this sail and repurpose it to use it as a covering for the sun. You know, like a sun. You know, to provide shade from the sunlight or whatever like that. And so I thought this was maybe kind of silly. Because, I mean, obviously she's not getting the sail to go sailing with. But she's getting it she wanted to get it to put up a shade to or whatever, right? And so but she was not able to. She was able to find this on the internet, and she's able to drive to get it. But my mother she has her own sort of physical issues that we're not going to get into, but she's not able to actually lift this thing and put it into the back of her truck. So she's dependent on me, her son, who I'm not even really that strong and tough, but I'm a strapping young lad, and she's an old lady. So she wouldn't be able to do things like go around and collect sailboat sails if it wasn't for me being here to help enable her to do this, right? So she took me along for a ride, and we picked up this sail for a sailboat and brought it back home. And then the sail basically sat in our driveway for a few months, you know. It just kind of sat there, and eventually I think it started maybe collecting some, like, sort of accumulating mold because it got rained on, and it started growing things and stuff. And eventually I think she just, like, put this thing in the garage, where we have a lot of stuff, like, that I, you know, consider to be kind of like junk or whatever. And, you know, like, a year goes by. Now, my mom was telling me the other day that I think she's deciding to get rid of this sailboat sail that she needed my help to go get, but I can't drive, right? So it wasn't like she asked me to go drive and pick it up for her. She just put me in the passenger seat, took me along so she could sit in her truck and get me to put it in the back of her truck for her, because she's not able to do that stuff. She's not, so like my mother is not really able to do a lot, and she requires me to do like really like not very much for her, but so instead of being independent and strong, you basically have a bunch of like a bunch of codependent, weak people who basically would be basically incompetent and not be able to survive on their own. But together we form a little family unit of toxic codependency. And the thing is, like, what's interesting too is that, like, if I individuate out of this, you know, it also makes it so that the rest of my family is probably, you know, they're going to have a harder time without me here for a number of reasons. You know, they wouldn't be able to pick up sailboat sales, for one thing, right? Now, so I'm just sharing this as one. There's a certain poetic thing that, for me, I feel reinforced. Like, as great as Emily Dickinson is, there's also Lawrence Ferlinghetti. Like, you can be a poet and you can also be a submarine captain, right? You can also be, you know, fighting the Nazis in submarine battles and then do poetry. You don't have to be a little girl hiding away in her mother's house the whole life. You can be a manly man and go to war and fight people and then still come out the other side and be a poet, right? So, and a few more. I'm just going to read a few more from Lawrence Ferlinghetti here, because these are just little short. I mean, these aren't. I don't think these are even aphorisms. They're shorter than that, right? He says, "Stand up for the stupid and crazy." Yeah, right. Which is like, I think there's the voice of logic, the voice of reason, has enough people standing up for it as is. But the oppressed, the stupid, not just crazy, but the stupid and the crazy. The people who are really, like to say that maybe it would have been smarter to individuate, to become a strong man who could support myself and paddle my own boat like Fernand. But he also says to stand up for the stupid and the crazy, right? And to stand, like, maybe my family is stupid and crazy, but they need me to stand up for them. I don't know, right? But we're going to read some more. See eternity in the eyes of animals. See eternity not the other night, but tonight. Express the inexpressible. Don't be too arcane for the man in the street. Be a songbird, not a parrot. Be a canary in the coal mine. A dead canary is not just an ornithological problem. Be also a rooster waking up the world. Write short poems in the voice of birds. Birdsong is not made by machines. Give your poems wings to fly to the treetops. And this is, you know, there's something interesting about this, is that in the Alfred Hitchcock movie Birds, the bird song was actually made by machines. They didn't have any real bird sounds in that at all. It was all synthesizers. And sometimes, like, I do a lot of synthesizer stuff, and sometimes when I'm just hanging out listening to the birds, I start to think that certain birds sound a lot like synthesizers, which is kind of interesting. But Lawrence Ferlinghetti reminds us that birdsong is not made by machines, and to give the poem wings to fly to the treetops. Don't pander, especially not to audiences, readers, editors, or publishers. So, right now, even the problem though now is that I'm using Lawrence Ferlinghetti to perhaps pander to certain audience members who thought it was important to remind me of the 80th year anniversary of D-Day, the invasion of Normandy. So, I hope you're happy. I hope you're getting what you're looking for from this astrology channel, and I hope that I'm not crossing the line by pandering too much for you, by giving you what you want, by reading you these Lawrence Ferlinghetti poems. Don't cater to the middle mind of America nor to consumer society. Be a poet, not a huckster. Don't put down the scholastics who say a poem should have wholeness, harmony, radiance, truth, beauty, goodness. And then the next one is the whole one about paddling your own boat. I should also mention, the thing is, like, I have actually, for the last month or two now, for a few months, I have actually started working with a therapist. So I just want to reassure people, like, for a while I was making these videos and it felt like I was just sort of offloading some stuff as an excuse or whatever, as a substitute for doing some proper therapy, right? And I would just like to, I've been holding off on getting into this in my astrology channel because basically I get sick of people who use therapy as a virtue signaling device, or people extol the virtues of therapy. People who talk about how therapy is so great and how therapy does so much good things and like how everybody should go to therapy. And then it's like, okay, but how much therapy are you doing, right? Like, or there's this thing about, like, to me, I'm not gonna do any call outs or name any names, but I feel like there's some kind of imbalance between people talking about how therapy is so great, how about therapy is so helpful, about how everybody should do therapy, versus the amount of therapy people actually do. And the amount and the actual changes or benefits or that or the results that come from that therapy, right? I think there's a bit of a mismatch in that thing, right? And I don't want to be one of these people who talk about just like therapy is such a great thing, everybody ought to do it, and then, but meanwhile, it's kind of bullshit. It's pandering to an audience. It's telling people what they want to hear. It's trying to like fit into a certain, like whatever. I'm not going to get into that. But I just want to rest assured that I have been doing therapy. However, the whole problem with doing therapy, I find, is that therapy does get to be a little bit expensive, and a lot of therapy these days is just engineered in a certain way to just get you to make some sort of change or get you to do something as quickly as possible, just to get you from point A to point B, to just go and do the thing, like flicking a switch, and or because like you don't have, because you got it, right? It's the pressure, the economic pressure. Like, what are you going to do? You're like, even if you do decide to take your time and to do a lot, like a more drawn out therapy process, pretty soon you're going to find that you're broke and you don't have any money, right? And there's this whole thing about like the pressure to be independent. It's like, I'm not just living here with my mother and sister because it gives me some sort of the warm and fuzzy emotional security or something like that. It's because it's fucking expensive to rent a place. And if I'm paying a whole shitload of money to a landlord, these landlords are using my hard-earned dollar to pay off their own mortgage, and basically my labor is going to somebody else to pay their land ownership thing when I have a house. This, when my mom dies, this house, it belongs to me, right? Like, why the fuck am I going to fucking work? Why am I going to sweat my ass off to pay for your house so you can fucking profit off of my hard-earned dollar? And you can, and then you get to fucking be, you get to sit back and just passively make money off all these renters and be all like, well, good for you, young man. You get to be a hard-working dude. Well, I get to, I get to like have all these properties that are worth fucking lots of money, and meanwhile you have a property too, but you feel like a little girl. You feel like a little like a pussy because you're not tough enough to go out and work as a contractor, as a carpenter, as a well-to-do tough dude, right? You know what? It was interesting. I was walking my dogs today, as I usually do, and there's a sign on the ground, the sign on somebody's lawn of one of these contractors, of one of these guys who do kind of this mass, this. I'm not gonna name names, and I'm not gonna get too specific about it. But what I've noticed is that, well, like when I was young, I was in a, like I didn't go very far with this. I was in a pre-teen drama class for acting, and that drama class it ended up like we ended up doing a play, a performance of a Charlie Brown play. And in this Charlie Brown play, I played Linus, the kid with the blanket, right? And apparently I did a really good job with this as a little kid playing Linus, but there was something about like this, there's something about like either like stage fright or performance anxiety. I mean, I did it anyways, but I did not really like the feeling of being up on stage performing with a lot of people watching me and reacting. And it kind of left me with this feeling like I don't really want to do this, right? And there's something about my own YouTube channel and trying to be successful, doing some kind of a performance or something like this, whether this is stage fright or whether this is like social anxiety or performance anxiety, there's something in me where I don't really want to be popular. I don't really want to, there's something about if I was to somehow make this channel so it was successful and every time I made a video I was getting thousands and thousands and thousands of subscribers, I don't even know if I want that. I don't know if I want to experience that and everything that goes with it. Right? So it's true that maybe I'm self-sabotaging this channel because I don't really want to be popular. I don't really want to be successful, right? But what I'm bringing this up is that there was another kid who was in the class with me who, I think it was the guy who played Charlie Brown. And, my dad was a chiropractor. His father was a pharmacist. On my other side of the family, my grandparent was a lawyer. That I kind of come from a more of a, I don't know if you call this bourgeois or a more of an, the kinds of jobs that people had in my family were more of this doctors and lawyers, and I mean chiropractors maybe a bit more woo-woo or funny, people don't take it seriously, but that's where my family comes from, right? And the kid who played Charlie Brown, his dad paints houses for a living, and he's always done this. He still paints houses, but there's something about the working, I don't know if this is because of the working class influence, but the kid who played Charlie Brown is dead now, and he's been dead. He died of a drug overdose, right? And there's all these kids, and what I'm trying to say is that when it comes to being healthy masculinity, right? When it comes to being strong and independent, being resilient and working class, there's a certain amount of people, a certain amount of men who are able to do this. And then there are a certain amount of men who are, it's like the turtles, the thing where the little turtles are going to the eggs hatch and they go to the ocean and all the seagulls peck them off, right? For every strong man who's able to be I'm a tough carpenter, I go in and I get the job done, I work hard, I make the money, for every one of these guys, there's a guy who's dead from a fucking drug overdose. For every one of these guys who is a proud, he's a family man. He works hard. He supports his kids. For every one of these guys, his children grow up in this environment and they fucking die before they reach adulthood, right? Because this is the economic pressure, is that you have to be tough. You have to go in there. You have to work a job that people that you may not want to do, but you just got to man up. And in all the fucking your aversion, all the stuff you don't want, you have to this stuff you have to repress. You know, this is Mars-Pluto. You have to repress all this stuff, all these feelings of discomfort, and then, you know, a tough guy just drinks his problems away. You know, you're working class, you ain't no pussy, you just drink, you drink, fight, fuck, do a whole bunch of drugs, and you die, and you leave a good-looking corpse, right? There's people, you know, that's why so it's like, what the fuck is healthy masculinity, right? What the fuck? I don't know, man. But, you know, apparently, you know, I don't, so it's like, I got this problem where when I was working, before I had a psychotic break, I was basically, you know, I was working a job that was kind of girly. I was working in a photo lab, and I was like, you know, all my coworkers were like women, and, you know, and I was like, it was kind of like the kind of a job a gay guy would have. And then my roommates were a bunch of these like tough dudes who were like going out and like renovating houses, and like, you know, there's this whole thing about like being like, you know, you have to be clean, you know, how you clean and sober. And these guys would just be like, these guys probably like, they're probably smoking weed every day at work, or doing drugs and building stuff, and getting shit done. And there's this like, I have this thing on me that I have to be like, you have to be like totally pure, totally no drugs, no alcohol, no cigarettes, just be completely, you know, completely sober, completely clear-minded, and then go out and do all the hard work and not do any drugs and not socialize with any of the other guys who are like this. And I mean, it's kind of fucking crazy, isn't it? Right? Or like, there's this thing of being like, if you're too much like this, you're like a, you know, whatever, you're like, I'm gonna be completely sober and drink like Earl Grey tea and like play with tarot cards and like, you know, take my cute little dogs for walks and be like a little girly man and have no, and listen, this having this feeling that like, if I want to actually be independent and like not feel like emasculated, I'm emasculated, or have the ability to like make my own decisions in life and like navigate my own circumstance, I have to make a whole bunch of money just to actually have a place to live. And then that money is going to go to some landlord who's using it to pay off his mortgage while I have my own fucking house. Like, what's the fucking point of this? What is the fucking point? Right? Ugh! Like, why is it like this? Why can't we? But the thing is, like, it's fucked because it's like there's a whole. The problem here in Canada is if we have a housing shortage, we're going to need to build more homes. So if you're looking for a job, there's going to be tons of jobs just building homes, right? I don't think I'm going to work as a construction worker. I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to be a fucking submarine fucking commander. I don't think so. Probably not, right? So, like, So this is my video on Mars square Pluto. I hope you like it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting the channel. Doot doodle loot doot. Keep on rocking in the free world. Bye.